I just want to say hello to everyone on our social media family. And I have been waiting for this for some time. I had to be somewhat intentional. I had to persevere. But we have got U.S. Senator Tim Scott here doing this interview with us. And Senator Scott, I can't tell you how excited I am. I know you're in between doing your job, Washington, D.C., Senator from South Carolina. You're doing news network interviews. I know you're doing all you can. Thank you for giving us a few minutes. How are you doing personally? You doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. This has been a busy season, and I am very thankful for the season, but it has been very, very busy.
I understand. I usually will wait and give proper honor to who the people are that I'm interviewing, and I certainly would want to do that with you. So I don't want people to misunderstand what's happening. But our senator has very little time, and I want to make sure we jump right into the subject matter that I want to talk about today. Senator, I think you know that there's been a sharp divide for some time, and we've got some age-old diseases that has bubbled to the top. And certainly, I'm one of those guys that's been involved in crossover ministry for many, many years. It's gotten popular all of a sudden to be involved in it, but I've been chopping at this tree for a long time.
Well,
but I wanted to, yeah, I wanted to come at this from a three-pronged approach. Let me give it context. I've hit Miles McPherson from a sociological aspect. I'm going to be talking to a pastor friend of mine, Dr. Darius Daniels, from a theological aspect. I wanted to talk to you from a political aspect. What can our elected officials, such as yourself, do to help heal this racial divide in America?
It's a great question, Ron. Thank you, number one, for your leadership and ministry in my life. I mean, you're not just a fantastic pastor and an amazing individual. You have fed me over the years. My mother, myself, and my friends have been coming to churches where you have been the pastor for at least a decade. I think longer than a decade. And so I am thankful that you have provided me an opportunity and a venue to have a conversation a decade ago, not just because it's hot. You were there when it was not. So thank you for that. The question is, what can we do from a political perspective? Well, first thing we can do is remind ourselves that the foundation of this nation, like it or not, has a biblical nexus to it. So the fact of the matter is our birth certificate as a nation says that we all have inalienable rights that come from our Creator, not from man, not from a white one or a black one or a red one or a brown one or a yellow one, but our value comes from God.
Yes.
And value is codified, like in law, in the heart of our Father. And so our goal is to express it. And so if we start off by remembering that each person has intrinsic value, and this nation's foundation is upon that intrinsic value, and that we are still making up for the original sin of not living up to the birth certificate. I was once 3/5 of a man, according to our Constitution.
Right.
But the Civil War that tore this country apart, because those who were free were willing to fight and die and kill their brothers and sisters, their literal brothers and sisters, for the freedom of an oppressed people. Now, that comes from a higher power that I am willing to lay my life down for people who cannot speak for themselves. If we start the conversation from a political perspective, recognizing that this nation has and must continue to do things that are painful, that are hard, that are sometimes unattractive, and sometimes unpopular in order to get someplace we know we need to go, then we're starting in the right place. The second thing we can do as political leaders is to realize that you can't legislate the heart. I think we have to encourage a conversation. Myself and James Lankford, a white guy from Oklahoma, senator from Oklahoma, came up with something called Solution Sunday, which focuses our attention on breaking bread over time with people of different races, because we know we can't legislate it. He's a former youth pastor. I'm a wannabe pastor, and we both have a strong desire to make sure that this nation reflects the love of God in each of us. But at the same time, we have to start where the problem began.
Right.
That's in the heart.
Right.
Then we have to matriculate, as we say it, over to the policy position. And what we've done from a policy position is trying to close the gap between those who have and those who have not. That gap is easy to see in black and white. Black home ownership, around 40%.
Right.
White home ownership, almost 80%. The wealth in this country is typically seen in the value of your home. So if you don't have a home, you have no access to the American dream, according to most people. So we want to close that gap, and we've worked on that through opportunity zones. We've worked on that through legislative accomplishments on the historically black colleges and universities. We keep working on that through the employment that we saw before coronavirus 19. We keep working on that by focusing our attention on certain illnesses and challenges like sickle cell anemia that is almost exclusively black. When you put your attention, you put on your legislative lens and you see the least of these, according to Matthew 25, I have a responsibility not to serve the top of the food chain. I have a responsibility to serve at the bottom up, the people who need the help the most, not those who can afford a lobbyist. I need to serve those who can't afford a lobbyist, who can't come to Washington. My first trip to Washington, D.C. was once I got elected to Congress. I had no opportunity to come to the nation's capital growing up in a single parent household mired in poverty. So my lens has adjusted to the people who grew up just like me. And if we attack the problems from that vantage point, to God be the glory. We'll see men and women coming together. We'll see black and white having conversations. When we create economic parity in this country, it goes a long ways towards racial reconciliation. It is not the number one issue. The heart is the number one issue. But it is certainly in the top 3 or 4 things we can do to bridge.
No doubt. And just to throw a little bit more theology into this, I believe you're right. The systemic problems, the infrastructure problems that would keep some people out, they need to be addressed politically. But the hard issue, you know, I had a pastor one time that came and looked at our church and saw all the diversity in the Deep South. He said, "How? Tell me how you did this." I said, "I don't believe there is a how." I said, "It's not what you do." I said, "It's what you are." A seed produces after its own kind. Nobody wants to be your project. Yeah, nobody wants to be your project. They want to know that it's genuine and authentic, so it's what you are. Quickly, I want to go to you have been leading the Senate Police Reform Bill. When will it come out, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Well, I hope to have it out, Ron, by Wednesday. The text should be finalized today. I'll have the package in my hand, giving it to other senators later on this evening. By tomorrow, I hope to be getting buy-in from my colleagues. But by Wednesday, I want to drop the bill so that we can start this journey with my House colleagues together. So what the bill does, 3 basic areas. First, we need more information. When it comes right down to it, whether it's the Walter Scott incident in South Carolina where a police officer shot a man in the back 5 times, 30 feet away, or whether it's George Floyd with a knee on your neck for 8.5 minutes, we need information. We need data on how often and where these incidents are happening. Breonna Taylor, a young lady in Louisville, Kentucky, shot in her own home 8 times because officers, plainclothes from what I understand, no body camera on, knocked lightly, and then used a battering ram to get in the house, causing a major scene. How often does that happen? Who are we serving these no knocks on? If you cannot make good decisions on part of the information, only 40% of the departments actually report information that leads to serious bodily injury or death. I asked for this, by the way, 5 years ago. I've been working on this for 5 years. I've written 2 books about race relations in America. I think of it as part of my call in life to deal with bridging the gap, building a bridge. So that's one way we do it. The second way we do it is by providing the resources necessary to get our police officers all over the nation the proper training so that they have the skill set. You know, when you think about an officer's response to a critical life-threatening situation, Fear and adrenaline combined together is a toxic mix.
Yes, sir.
Without proper training on de-escalation. When you're sitting there watching an officer on someone's neck for 8.5 minutes, do you have a duty to intervene? Of course you should. We got to have a policy. We've got to make sure training is there. Chokehold. Do you have to use a chokehold if the officer's life is not in danger?
Right.
No. So we've got to reduce funding for the departments that refuse to eliminate that tactic. So what I try to do, the use of force review boards, we have to study that. So often what you'll find is that when you, like in the Walter Scott case, officer kills someone. If you read his incident report, it reflected that Walter Scott had his taser. The video that comes up, surfaces 2 weeks later, says that was completely fabricated. There should be an enhanced penalty for false police reports when it leads to serious bodily injury or death. Because in South Carolina, it is harder to convict an officer of murder than it is to convict the officer of a problem with the police report, especially when it leads to death. So I want to make sure that we give more arrows in the quiver. So when you're pulling it out, you're hitting the target. And frankly, on officer misconduct, I want to make sure that the departments that have the records make those records available when that officer tries to transfer to a new department. That has got to be done. If we do that, I think we'll get rid of the so-called bad apples.
This is more substance to real change. I'm going to be honest with you. You are a friend of mine, so I'm not just saying it because you're here. This is when this kind of stuff happens, Senator, everybody's like, what can I do? What can I do? I don't know what to do. What can I do? Because another Instagram post, it just seems to cheapen it. What can I do? This is substance. This is substantive change. I'm getting excited just hearing you. I knew of it, but I didn't know the details that you're explaining to me. How hopeful are you that the president will sign this?
I talked to the president last night. We can get this bill to his desk. I am about 99% sure he will sign it. Now, I'm pretty sure that the House, unfortunately, this is where politics comes to play. I was talking to some of my Democrat colleagues recently, and they told me something that stunned me. They said they have been instructed not to get on my bill.
Politics. The reason there's silence right here is because there's got to be bipartisan if you really want to stop. If you're really interested in fixing the issue, they got to quit thinking about who's going to be elected next and get this stuff done.
Exactly. And it broke my heart, Ron, because I have been the African-American with police cars around my vehicle. I've been stopped 7 times in a single year as an elected official. I've been stopped coming into the Senate with my Senate lapel pin on that says he's a senator. So I see this as an issue that is real, that scares me when I have to put both my hands outside the window in order to let the officer know I am not a threat. All my windows are down, and I'm scared that something might go bad. That's not right.
No.
So someone to play politics with such a serious issue breaks my heart, but it also ticks me off. I am willing to work with anyone, anywhere, at any time to resolve this issue. And frankly, Ron, it doesn't have to be my bill. I'm not interested in getting credit. Take the parts of my bill that you like, get your bill that you like, put the two together, make a comparison, and let's go forward on the stuff that we agree on. Because that's exactly what I did when I made this bill. I took a look at the House bill and said, you know what, that makes a lot of sense. More training, a lot of sense. More information, a lot of sense. Do I want to know every traffic ticket that's written in America? No. But if it's a serious bodily injury, I know about that. So I took their legislation and I said, let's zero it in on where the problem is. I don't want to demonize all law enforcement. That's not my goal.
Right.
I don't want to break between the African-American community and the law enforcement community. That's a bad situation for the African-American community. Right. We should put them both together. The Hispanic community has a lot of similar outcomes. We can fix this if we focus on the problem and not see this as they're all racist or they're all not.
Right.
That's stupid. The
That's not
country doesn't have to be a racist country for us to have racism embedded in parts of it. Law enforcement doesn't have to be racist to have some racism embedded in it.
right.
So we have to be willing to understand that you can make progress and move back sometimes at the same time.
We got 8 minutes, and I'm gonna throw a question in there that wasn't one, not trying to trick you, it wasn't one that I was gonna ask.
No problem.
Is there something we can do? And I'm showing my ignorance here, so I'm asking as a student. I'm out here in San Jose, California now, who has seen a 42.7% drop in people signing up for the police force. That could be for varying reasons. The cost of living here is astronomical. They probably can't even afford to live. So I don't know all the reasons, and I don't want to claim to. But I have appealed to some of the lawmakers in my area and some in the police force to, is there a way where a really aggressive approach, when I say aggressive, I mean like a college after a prized athlete of African-American police officers into the law enforcement? Because to me, simple things like community policing, where there's at least, if you have a highly populated or densely populated African-American community, sending a squad full of white officers right now, the distrust gap is so great, nothing good's going to come out of that.
Well, Ron, I addressed that in my bill. I'm glad you said that. I darn near forgot my own part of the bill. So thank you for saying that. So here's the deal. In our bill, we say you got to hire trainers and recruiters who happen to look like the community.
Right.
We're not having affirmative action. We're not having set-asides, but we are saying that African-American recruiters typically find more African-Americans than a non-African-American recruiter. A female recruiter finds more females than a non-female recruiter. So what we've said in our legislation is let's encourage and provide grants so that you have more recruiters from the communities that they serve. And I'm working on something else that's not in the bill yet. This addresses what you just said. San Jose, California, the cost of living is really high.
Really
My
high.
opportunity can make it easier to have workforce housing embedded in your community. That's number one. Number two, this is the kicker. I want to have a new tax credit where police officers who live in the communities where they serve and the crime is beyond a certain threshold, I want to give them money back on their taxes to move into the neighborhood.
Woo.
That, I think, can be a game changer.
I do too.
Where you turn around the corner, you see a police car, you're like, wait a second.
Right.
A, I'm going to behave a little differently.
Yes.
And B, if I'm an old grandmother like the ones that prayed me through my hard times,
yes.
She is saying, thank you, Jesus.
Yes.
Thank you, Jesus. Romans 13 talks about government officials having swords back in the day. Well, this cop living on my corner, living on my street, gives me the sense that the Lord and his ministering angels have just occupied the house next door. Can I get an amen? You know, that's what I'm talking about.
I was just telling me and Hope have sat down on the couch when this last horrific event, it just made me tired, you know.
Yeah.
Because for someone who's been involved in community development and building bridges for so long, I'm like, wow, man, have we not moved the needle any further than this? And I talked to my wife just about practical elements. I'm a practical guy. What practical things we can do to de-escalate, begin to diffuse it. Are we going to fix this overnight? Or are we going to fix it in my lifetime? I don't know. But there are steps. Steps that we can take incrementally to fix it. 3 or 4 minutes. What can people do at home as it pertains to the political side of solving this racial divide? Because you know there's a lot of politics in it, Senator.
Let me say this. I'm going to say this as gently as I possibly can. This you may not even agree with, Ron. We should be careful to think that every white person has an axe to grind with black people. And we should be very careful to think that every black person has an axe to grind with a white person. But more importantly, and this is where it's important to remember this, when Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote the letter from the Birmingham jail about opportunity and access and equity and help, he was talking to pastors. He wasn't writing that letter to everyday people. He was saying, we as the body need to stand up and be counted. What everyday people can do is to be counted. If you don't have friendships, well, listen, Ron, let me say it. I wish we could hit the rewind button. I could say, let me say it this way. This is shorter. Do what Ron Carpenter has been doing for the last 30 years, please. Ron Carpenter sat down with Black people and he understood where they were coming from when he was in high school. But this is not a new thing. It's who you are. It's not what you do. If you want to make a difference, please do me a favor. Don't complain about the problem if you've never sat down and had a serious conversation with someone who doesn't think like you, who doesn't look like you, and who doesn't live the way you live. If you haven't had those conversations and had them for 6 months, not for one meal, but for 6 months, you might not be serious about making any change.
As I close right here, you know, it's funny you would say that. I remember saying in the pulpit over and over and over again, I said, just because we have gotten people of different colors and races in the same building to worship, let's not pat ourselves on the back if you leave here and have no involvement in each other's life after this service is over with. I said, who have you asked to go out and eat? Who have you offered to take a cup of coffee? Who are you wanting to sit down and have conversations with? I've told people, I don't think it happens naturally. It has to be intentional until it becomes natural. It can eventually become natural, but it starts off as being intentional. And I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the friendship, and you've allowed. I think I met you when you were on city council.
I was,
I believe, and God has blessed you richly. I know you got to go. 1 minute. Any last comments?
Well, listen, everyone who's listening, know this. Proverbs 29:18, without a vision, people cast off restraints and they perish. We're seeing that in the streets throughout America. Have a vision. Have confidence that God's not finished with this nation yet. Be excited about your future. Be excited about our future. Know that all things are possible through Jesus Christ. Do not look at me as a government official to solve the problems. Look at me as a brother in Christ who wants to be a part of the solution. We are the solution. Yes, the body of Christ is the hope of the world. We are why we have a city on the hill. If we do what we're supposed to do, I assure you the country will follow.
Hey,
that's all.
Preach it. For a senator, you're doing some great preaching. Much love to you. Blessings in getting these bills passed. It's so exciting to hear that there's some rubber meeting the road. And thank you for the time that you've given us. Please go ahead and carry on with your day. Thank you so much, Senator Scott. We appreciate it.
God bless. Yes, sir. Thank you.